What is Hammy Faye Baker's connection? This group reminds me of another group,
Oh,
which
yeah?
is they kind of reminds me of Charles's poker group.
Well, I think that this connects to maybe that photo that we saw.
Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
Bacula. Wait, so I thought Bacula was a made up character. Is Bacula a real person?
Scott Bakula? Yeah. Did you ever watch Quantum Leap?
Oh my gosh, that's Scott Bakula in Quantum Leap?
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark and I are talking about Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 3, so spoilers are ahead. And if you're enjoying the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss a single one of these breakdowns, then be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. And with that, Mark, chat about the Westies. I like
Oh,
this group.
I like the Westies too. You know, we haven't seen too much of the sauce people other than their ham that they're chopping up. But you know, the conjunctivitis guy and Christmas tree guy, they're great. They're awesome. I love both of them.
Great casting. I'm curious if we see any of them again in future seasons. I think you asked that same question kind of last episode. I would like to see more of them. Like, I think they're a fun addition.
Yeah, and I always forget his name, but Christmas Tree Guy, the actor that plays him, he's hilarious. I know he got shredded for the Eternals role for Marvel,
Yes.
and
Yes.
he kept it going. So like, I'm super proud of him. He was kind of like an awkward nerd character before, but now he's
Right.
playing ripped characters, and he's great.
Did you ever, so that's Kumail Nanjiani. Did you ever watch Silicon Valley?
No,
It's just like all-star cast of comedians. He's in it. And exactly what you're talking about, like just awkward nerd, definitely not shredded. Nobody would be intimidated by him. And it's great seeing him in this, and I'm sure for many people it's also great seeing his ripped abs.
yeah. One thing that was really funny to me, you know, when they're looking at the murder board,
Hmm.
and they didn't have a picture of Christmas Tree Guy yet because they hadn't met him, but they had a picture of all of the other Westies from when they were playing Oh Hell with them, and I was like thinking about what it took to get those pictures and how subtly comical that is that they just like took pictures of them while playing this game.
Right. And I think that's kind of alluded to when Mabel is talking about how they're going to handle kind of getting this information. And then you see Eva just go in there guns a blazing. Like they definitely do things in a little bit more of a low key manner. Like they weren't planning on telling anybody there was a murder. They weren't trying to make it seem like they're investigating. Although I kind of wonder after by the fourth season, I think if you see these three, you might be careful about what you say to them and assume that they're investigating something.
Right, right. Like there have been many murders in this building, and the
Right.
ones that always solve them happen to be these three. I would assume that
Right.
if they came around, that they would be investigating a murder.
Right. When Charles goes to Eye Patch's place with the eye patch on, that was so absolutely ridiculous. And you could tell how mad he was that it looked like two people were making fun of him, you know?
Yeah.
This group reminds me of another group,
Oh
which
yeah.
is they kind of reminds me of Charles's poker group.
Charles's poker group. Interesting. Oh right, because they all meet and play the game together. They are a diverse cast of people. Interesting.
I'm definitely getting Saz put a group of people together vibes.
Well, I think that this connects to maybe that photo that we saw.
Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that that's Saz in the photo.
I definitely think it's a female because it looked like pigtails coming down. Dawn thought it was potentially like the straps of the overalls, but I thought they were a little too uneven, like it didn't look like a strap.
And it's a tall female, then. If it is a female,
Yes.
she is tall. I thought that I could see through like the blacked out mark lipstick, which Saz has always had
Hmm.
lipstick on. And
Hmm.
I do have a feeling that Saz is Dudanoff.
I could very much see that, and I can see this group as being as potentially working with Saz, and all kind of connected with, because I think they've. I don't know if I saw a ham radio in Pink Eye's place, but I do think we saw one in the Sauce place. We definitely saw one in Christmas Guy's place, because they heard the song and then he got kind of self-conscious and moved the ham radio.
Yeah, which I don't remember seeing it in Sauce Place, and I didn't see it in Conjunctivitis Eye, but in the previously in Only Murders in the Building recap, it showed something from season 3 where Saz talks about being on her ham radio, thinking that Ben Gilroy's murder was not, done intentionally towards him, but was aimed at Charles in the first place. And so Saz has a ham radio that she specifically talks about. So I'm feeling that Dudanoff and the crossed out picture are Saz.
I'm with you on that, and I think Saz is potentially playing the long game.
I agree.
I feel like there has to be a murder in Only Murders in the Building. So if she is alive, then there's either going to be an upcoming one, or in the very first episode of this season, Charles mentioned a cold case because they didn't think they had a case yet.
Which cold case was that he mentioned?
He didn't actually say any details. He just said, something about, they said something about, whether or not they should do this cold case. And so it seems like there is a murder, an old murder in the building where they don't know, who did it.
And maybe Saz was using the Westies to investigate that murder.
I think she possibly embedded herself, had like an outfit that she would wear so that she would kind of blend in, and that she was kind of one of the Westies at times.
Right, and it would make sense, her being a Westie, she also wants to keep an eye on Charles, but then also the murderer that murdered Saz, that was attempting to murder Charles, may have found out that Saz lived in that apartment and was trying to frame Saz for Charles's murder.
So another kind of interesting thing is the female voice that we hear on the radio. Well, the voice sounded female, and the voice sounded foreign to me.
Correct. Didn't the brothers sisters have an accent when they spoke?
100% they had a foreign accent. I went back, they say so few words, it's really hard for me to tell if it's
the
them.
Same.
One of them has a deep voice, which I definitely don't think it was her, because it came off in kind of a higher octave.
Well, I do have a connection with the brothers sisters as well. Okay, so one of the things that they are looking for the killer is somebody that has access to Charles' apartment, correct?
Yes.
When the detective is talking to them, the doppelgangers show up, the actors playing the characters, they just walked into their apartment. They didn't let them in. They were surprised to see them too. They said, "What are you guys doing here?" So to me, the brothers sisters or whoever let them in.
And it did say that they were sent by the brothers sisters.
Right.
Which kind of made me wonder. So here's the interesting thing. So if that was one of the brother sisters, it did to me sound more like a warning than a threat. It didn't sound like the person was saying, "Stop doing this or I'll kill you," as much as it kind of sounded like a warning, that like a friendly warning. We didn't do this, but the last person that was snooping around was killed.
Right.
The other thing I could potentially see is whether or not that voice is Saz doing a character. Although as a stunt double, she wouldn't normally be doing voices, so I don't know if she could pull off accents or not. But just because she's a stunt person doesn't mean that she can't do that. But I did potentially think that that could be part of the bit that she is playing, maybe.
That voice at the end really threw me off, because to me, I did think it was one of the brothers sisters.
Right.
You know, we have the the lesbian brothers game. There does seem.
They keep coming up.
Yeah, even though they were in just for a second, and they're weird, but
yes,
is this also another red herring? Because the last time in the last season, the murderers were the showrunners, essentially. So it's like,
right.
would they do the showrunners again? I feel like they might think that people won't suspect them because they just did that. So they're like, well, we can hide it. But also in the picture, Saz is holding the pig.
Yes, and I really do like to, when I have a theory, I like to stick to it for far too long and find too many things that I think are connected to it that may be absolutely nothing. I mentioned that I think that is the sick pup because, while not common, pigs can be called pups. Howard twice referenced the pig's depression. One time explicitly saying that it was depressed, and the second time saying that it was very close to jumping out the window and ending its life. So it could be like a mental sickness, not a physical sickness. And so, for whatever reason, I think that is the sick pup. And I really wonder what is Hammy Faye Baker's connection,
right,
in all of this.
Is she sick because she lost Saz? Because it did look like she was friendly in the photo with who I'm assuming is Saz.
Right.
Maybe that's why she's sick.
Maybe.
But if she was hiding in the Dudenoff apartment and Saz was there, but Saz had been gone for a bit, then whoever's on the radio said leave her alone, Hammy Faye Baker alone.
Hammy Faye Baker, yeah.
So is that person Hammy Faye Baker? Because that person sounded excited to see Hammy Faye Baker.
Yes.
I wonder if
I think that voice is the crossed out, potentially the person crossed out in the picture holding the pig, which would mean that person might have been a member of the Westies group, like that floor.
Yeah. I mean,
and whether or not they were crossed out because it was like a falling out or because they don't want that person's identity known, or I don't know. There's some interesting stuff going on there with the Westies.
I mean,
I don't think they're involved, but...
No, but I do think that they were trying to cover for Dudenoff. You know, like
Yes.
In the very second episode, they were talking, they kept asking questions about Dudenoff, and like, they all looked like, make an excuse, don't give them too much. So it does seem like they are covering for Dudenoff, so I feel like the cross-off face is to protect the identity of Dudenoff.
Yeah.
Do you have any theories of the tinsel, of the not tinsel?
I don't. I was trying to wrap my head around what it could be. I can't figure it out. I love the fact that it looked like tinsel and it's not, and I love how Kumail Nanjiani knew that it was by doing that, which is a good point that Christmas is a very flammable holiday. That is...
The silent killer. Yeah, that I loved the whole bit of him, you know, being a Christmas influencer, like a fitness Christmas influencer, and actually like hating Christmas. I think with his character in this episode, they did a lot of subverting expectations. Like in the beginning, they talk about like he has to be a hunter. This guy looks like he's a hunter. He's got a gun mounted on his fireplace, you know, and he's this Christmas nut.
He's buff. So he could definitely like carry the body.
Yeah. So like there was all these things that made it seem like, okay, he maybe did it, but then it was like, well, you know, he's not even a Christmas influencer, you know, he just got trapped in the algorithm basically.
Right. That is such a poignant way to point out how not easy it is for some of these people and how they can get trapped in some of what they do. You know, like so many people want that influencer life because it looks, from swiping through it, it looks amazing.
Right.
They're always going on vacations. They're always living their best life, you know. Everything looks great. and it's kind of interesting seeing this different perspective of it, of like this person has had to embrace something that they now kind of hate because that's the only way that they can get engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any theories on what the not tinsel is?
No, I was hoping you did because, it does maybe look like tin foil, but I can't think of why this tin foil would be important, like where it would come from. I was trying to relate it to the golf game, to the ham radio. I was trying to think of all these different things that it could be a part of, and that thing is just eluding me. Like, it doesn't really connect to Saz in any way. It doesn't really connect to the brothers sisters.
Do people use tinfoil to boost antenna radios?
Maybe, but I didn't see anywhere on the ham radios that had like an antenna.
Okay. Because I think when I first was wondering about ham radios, I was assuming that they had a pretty short range. And so, it would mean that you'd have to be relatively close to these people to do it. And I guess they can have different ranges based off of placement, and I don't remember if it was antenna. I don't think that this group necessarily has a ham radio that can transmit across the ocean. That is a possibility with ham radios, but I think you would need like a really good radio in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I mean that could be an argument to why it's not the brother sisters. Like it might be somebody in this hotel that they're using these ham radios just to like talk through, not the hotel,
right.
The Arconia. And the brothers sisters seem like they are based in California, which would be a very long distance to transmit that. So maybe not the brother sisters. Bacula.
You know what? I don't know why I just thought of this. You mentioned earlier something about Saz had been working on this in season 3, and that she thought that the murder from that might have been originally somebody trying to get to Charles, which, points to somebody that might have been wanting to get him for some time. I don't know why it just hit me. So what if this is... I've been looking at kind of like this cast of like who from this cast could it be? What if it's somebody from one of the previous seasons?
I mean, that's kind of why I still lean towards Bacula, because I think Joy, who was accused of murder by Charles, is now dating Bacula. So like it does seem like, and that was pretty early on in that season that she left and started dating Bacula, and we talked about Bacula a lot the last season. So
okay,
a part of me thinks that it could be Bacula. Other than that, like I don't really know who.
I didn't realize Bacula was a part of it because it's been a long time since I've seen season 3, and I don't think we actually saw Bacula, right?
Right, they just talk about Bacula.
Yes, so I love that because I bet that was like a joke that they wrote in there and they kept going with it, and then for this season I bet they were like, we'd like to flesh this character out a little bit, like let's see if we can get him in on it, and I'm sure he was like, yeah, of course. Like I don't think it was hard to convince him.
Right.
Okay, I didn't realize that he'd been brought in a previous season. We just hadn't seen him. So I can still see that. I would have him on my murder board. Maybe not right under suspect, but like one of the possible ones.
Potential. Like so far I feel like on my murder board we've got the brother sisters, we've got Bacula, and also I could see them doing something crazy this season and making it like Eugene Levy, right, as the murderer. Like, he got an access to Charles' apartment, which they all did, but, like, I don't think it's Ava Longoria because she's a little too crazy, and Zach Galifianakis looks too disinterested. Like, Eugene Levy seems like the most, like, invested in his character of Charles, like, of who he's playing.
I think it would be very interesting to have the murderer be a person playing themselves.
I think it would be funny.
You mentioning Bacula, like that's funny because I realize that this is a like this is a fictional portrayal of Bakula. Obviously, you know, Bakula doesn't have the same stunt double as, I mean, Charles's character doesn't exist. But I really don't believe that Bakula has a female stunt double. So this obviously is a like fictional portrayal. So it's not saying anything about him, but I would think that would be funny to like have the murderer be somebody real.
Yeah. Wait, so I thought Bakula was a made-up character. Is Bakula a real person?
Scott Bakula? Yeah. That's the actor that he was the one from, did you ever watch Quantum Leap?
Oh my gosh, that's Scott Bakula in Quantum Leap?
And he was also in Stargate, I think?
Okay,
SG,
I know
SG-1 maybe?
I know the actor. I just I guess I didn't know his name.
Scott Bakula. Oh yeah, I know Scott Bakula.
Okay. Well, now
I've got some serious love for Scott Bakula.
See, I recognize the actor. I just didn't realize that. I thought Scott Bakula was just a made-up character.
Right. Like the brothers, sisters, like the yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Well, this is
Bakula's real. That's why I'm saying that's a funny joke that they in season 3 that they keep bringing him up, but without actually casting him and paying him. So it's great that they got him actually into the show,
right?
To further that joke.
Well, it also kind of reminds, it makes me feel like why Scott Bakula was brought up in the first place is because, Charles Hayden Savage is almost like a Scott Bakula character, right? Famous in the 80s for, 1 or 2 shows. Yeah. And, after that, people just don't know who he is anymore. You're, just don't have that name recognition.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people do with Brazos, so it does feel like and then all right, that makes more sense.
I mean, that's just like Randolph not knowing who Brazos is, she's from a younger generation, so she doesn't get the reference.
True.
But I love that, that's the one thing that Charles wanted to follow up on first,
Yeah, right.
You really don't know
Scott Brazos? You don't know Brazos? That's funny.
So let's talk about the gang, because I do think we've kind of danced around them a little bit.
Yes.
And I think with them, we got to see the actors that are portraying them a little bit more, and I very much love that.
Oh yeah, so this episode, like you said, is 2 for the Road, and yes. 2 for the Road is about a couple rekindling their relationship. And so this seems like why this was titled this, is that each character is trying to build this relationship in these pairs. Same with Perfect Strangers, I felt like that was a great tie-in of another 80s sitcom that,
right.
2 people trying to figure out life together. And, I loved the dynamics of each one and the gang members.
Right. I thought that they did a great kind of job of showing a few of the different motivations that people in Hollywood have when they are playing characters. You have Eugene, who is trying to be very true to this person that he very much respects. And so he's really trying to get into his head, going through his books to see what does Charles read, and then you have Ava, who she's not disinterested in, Mabel the way that Zach is, but she does want to do her own thing, Yeah. So she's she started with this, and then she's taking that as a jumping off point to do her very own thing, down to changing the name. And that is something that a lot of people do in film, where they feel like you have to own it to a certain point. In order to bring something to life, sometimes you do have to make your own creative choices. You can't just try and think always what would the other person do.
Right.
And then I think, Zach is another completely different direction as far as just looking for an easy paycheck.
Right. Right.
I mean, I do think I think this was not the role he wanted, so I don't necessarily think that's him in life.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
That was this is the situation of this isn't really what I wanted, so what's the least amount of effort to the maximum amount of money that I can get,
Right. And I like you were saying, I love how they were all, each one was a little bit different, like how they were, wanting to portray each of the podcasters. And I loved that because I feel Charles Hayden Savage has always just wanted people to love him and like remember him and recognize him and be like, that's the guy from Brazos. He's the most beloved cop of, 1989. And like having Eugene Levy, who's a famous comedian actor, like being obsessed with Charles, I think that like finally Charles gets that little admiration he deserves.
Right. Although what I thought was like the best kind of short relationship that popped up was when Charles and Pink Eye realized that they both thought the other one hated each other, and they both come up with the realization that it's like, no, I'm just an awkward guy.
I'm just awkward.
Like, it's interesting. Like I feel like in that they were able to explore these characters in an interesting way, like the main three,
Yeah.
in an interesting way by having these kind of foils that they're with. Like when Oliver is trying so hard to get Zach to take him seriously because this is his one chance to be portrayed right. The little monologue that Howard did was, I mean, it was like, it was so nice of Howard, but at the same time it was so painful to Oliver, of like this truth that he's saying. And the sad thing that really hit for me was when Howard mentioned the fact that like this relationship isn't going to work, but rather than him being there with his girlfriend, he's so positive that he knows it's going to work, and he's instead focusing on this film. And that was kind of sad that Howard is basically saying like, your relationship's gonna fail, and you're so positive you don't even realize it, and you're missing out on quality time.
Yeah. Because I do think that like the way Zach, labels Oliver's character, he's like, you're just a narcissist. And I would say that like through most of the seasons he very much comes off like it's all about him. When he was thinking about like dating Loretta in the last season and she was about to move and he was like, you can't move, you signed a contract. Like he was so worried about his play that he didn't care about the feelings of the girl he loved. So like I felt like Zach's brutal takedown of him and then Howard's kind of brutal takedown of him, like, Oliver does have these flaws about him, but yet he does have a good heart and he does want to do the right thing. But yeah, this was a pretty brutal episode of like the character of Oliver, of like who he is in this show.
Yeah. And I think that also reflects back to the name of the episode, because in that movie it portrays this relationship in kind of a non-traditional Hollywood way, because it's not a everything is perfect situation, but it shows how a marriage can kind of lag at some point. And I think Audrey Hepburn's character actually has an affair. And so it does show the kind of like imperfections and, how things can sometimes grow a little bit strained. And it's one of the great things about these three characters is they are so perfectly imperfect. Like I see them as such normal people because they aren't these like perfect characters that it's like you never see them making mistakes, you never see them hurting each other. Like they're so well written that I feel like you could hang out with them, not like they're vaulted above you and it's like, oh, I could never be with this group. It's like I could see myself with these people.
Yeah, they are very flawed characters, all of them, and I think that is one thing this show does right, is the characters are very, like, even though they're going through outlandish murder solving, starting a podcast, they are very relatable characters. Like Charles is awkward and, lonely, makes omelets, and then when he, gets in a relationship, he gets in a relationship with a little bit of crazies, maybe.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know.
One last thing I wanted to mention with like the group. You know, I've mentioned before that I love some of the multi-tiered jokes that they have. When Oliver and Zach were doing the stuff to the music, and it ended with like the jump and like the heel click move.
Yes.
That to me looked exactly like the end of so many title sequences around that time, was like a freeze frame on a moment like that. But the one that the joke that really got me that I didn't even notice until I ended up watching this episode a third time.
Oh, nice.
And who knows, maybe this isn't even a joke, but to me this seemed like the biggest throwaway joke that was not paused for laughs and not played up for laughs. So it might not have even been noticed by most people. When Charles and Eugene Levy are trying to like see if, you know, the pink eye guy has like a bruise, and they're telling this crazy story about, you know, Salazar, whatever his name is, you know, Savage, like this crazy story. It starts off with Eugene saying, "Oh, do you remember the tell him the story that you told me?" And Charles at first is like, "Well, what story?" And it's like, "The one you told me at improv." And Charles starts stuttering like he does, and he's like, "Yes," and then he starts telling the story, and to me that is like, yes, and is like the golden rule of improv.
That is improv, yeah.
Like, you know, and that's exactly what he did in that moment, was like take this ridiculous, like he's shoved with this whole thing of like, it's your story, you tell it.
Right.
And yeah, it to me that was just like, and it was like just him stuttering it so you could barely even notice it, but I thought it was brilliant.
That is a really good joke. I noticed the yes and, because I even thought about it, but I didn't connect it to the improv, which that is so connected to improv, which is hilarious, and that's great. And another subtle joke is he's like, "Oh, at the improv, like you got to improvise this right now. Let's go,
Right,
come on."
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, it's very clever writing. I love this show.
Love it.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining in. Next week, come back. We will do Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 4. We look forward to seeing you then. I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.